All right, my name is Hayley Morgan, and I am a blogger, a business owner, and a social media activist. I told the first group I have just a couple things that are my heartbeat, the things I say over and over and over. And that's first the gospel, that you are not enough, but Christ is enough, and that's really good news. And second is that you have influence right where you are, that you don't have to be anybody special or anybody famous or anything else, but that you have influence in how God's made you and where He's placed you. So those are kind of my two rallying cries, and those are the only thing that I'm willing to kind of place a bet on, because those are the only things that I know to be true about everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about everyday activism and the common good, and how social media plays into that, and kind of my story with it. And then again, I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and I would love if you guys would think of some questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit up here and either look silly or start coming up with questions to ask myself. So be thinking about that. But about 15 months ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Ethiopia with 3 professional bloggers, a not-for-profit social media coordinator, we had a Christian music star, we had the Bachelorette, and we had Jessica Simpson's former private chef. So we had quite the ragtag group of women, and we were on a trip to help promote and bring awareness to Mocha Club and Fashionable. And Mocha Club is an aid organization that works in Africa, and they work in the areas of orphan care, HIV prevention, education, female financial empowerment, and overall health care, access, and clean water. So there's a zillion things that they do, but their whole premise is that if you give up a mocha, then you can pay to do all these great things in Africa. And they work with musicians in Nashville, and they kind of promote, they do a show, the musician, and then they ask, hey, join my team on Mocha Club, I think it's up to like $16 a month now. I think it started at $7 a month, which I think is still a really high price for a mocha with that messaging, but whatever. And so we went with them, and then Mocha Club also has a for-profit arm, which is called Fashionable, and they sell these scarves. I don't know if we're wearing them. I'm wearing one. I'm wearing the green right there with like the funny look on my face. And I think I'm wearing one of the scarves. But they get women out of prostitution and sexual slavery, and then teach them the trade of weaving, which is historically an Ethiopian trade. They do that there anyway. So they just teach them to make these scarves, and then they've created a market for them in the States. So we went to kind of tell that story and to learn more about what they did. And really the reason that I was on that trip and the reason I was able to go anyway is because a long time ago, I had started to believe that I had influence, that I had a voice, and that I should use that voice. And even when I was a little girl, I was totally the one to like march up to anybody who was in charge and like make sure that whatever injustice was happening was solved and corrected. And so I think that just kind of has continued on today. And I really, really wholeheartedly believe that I do have a voice and I do have influence, and that that's true for each of you as well. We can go on to the next slide. I don't have a clicker. We're having little technical problems, so I have to do like a song and dance. So Jeff back there knows to switch the PowerPoint. But anyway, like I said, I'm Hayley. That's my husband, Mike, and we actually went to Indiana Wesleyan down the road for college, and we met when I was 16. We got married 3 weeks after I turned 20, so while we were still at Indiana Wesleyan, and we lived in a teeny tiny little yellow house that cost us $400 a month, which was really good. It only cost us $400 a month because I think we had like $425 a month that came in, so that was good news. While we were still in school, we had a surprise sort of thing that sometimes happens when you're married, and Noah was born 9 months after that. And then once you start having kids, you don't want them to be a zillion years apart. So 1 became 4. And so now we have 4 little boys. And when I was in college, I thought I was going to be this like high-powered businesswoman, that I was going to be like running meetings and wearing black blazers and driving fancy black cars and kind of being the boss lady. And instead, I kind of moved into this life of really slow and really quiet and really maternal and soft and very, I was at home all the time. Anybody I saw was probably a mom of little kids too, who was like just struggling to kind of keep above water. So my life looked really vastly different from the impact that I thought I was going to be able to have. But during that time, so we were at Indiana Wesleyan, finished school there. My husband got a big kid fast track job in, I've got a little bit of feedback going on. Am I standing in the wrong spot? I am. Oh, okay, I'm better. Okay. So yes, finished school. Husband went and got a high-powered fast track job at a giant Fortune 100 company. And they told us they're hiring 10 people across the country. They were all from giant schools with huge business programs. And then my husband here from little old Indiana Wesleyan, he kind of ekes in there and gets a job with the people from Penn State and Ohio State, just all the big schools. And so they tell us, great, we're going to put each of the 10 in 10 different cities, and they have to be, where you end up has to be 600 miles away from where you're from. And they do that because they want to indoctrinate you into this way of corporate America. So we had 10 cities to choose from. We could pick our top 3, and then they would hopefully place us in one of those choices. Well, we ended up going to Charlotte, North Carolina, which felt like was a good option, better than some of the others. So we ended up in Charlotte, and that's where Noah was born, Cooper was born. Cooper's the one in the little plaid shirt up there. So anyway, and it was out there that I met a good friend. Her name is Michaelin, and we met at church, and she actually was the first woman that I saw who blogged full-time, and she was the breadwinner in her house. Her husband had taken out a lot of business debt, and it was a great business idea at the time, but then that was right at the same time that the economy just imploded on itself, and so they really were in the position where she had to make a good deal of money. And that lit a spark for me. I was like, what? You mean you can stay at home and you can do your normal home things, but you can still have this huge influence? You can still write and speak to women and make money while you're doing it. I mean, she had huge advertisers like J. Crew and Ford, and just people sought her out. She had over 1.5 million page views a month on her website, and here she is writing about her house decorating, which is what she loves, and she's gone on to publish books about it and everything else. But anyway, that for me was that first spark of oh, I could do this. I could still have a job while being a mom, which happened earlier than I thought it would. So, yeah, we can go to the next slide. I guess what I was going to say, yeah, we have 4 boys, 3 businesses. We just recently had 2 homes, but sold the second one, and we had that one because of the recession when we moved back to Indianapolis from Charlotte. But anyway, our businesses are the Influence Network, which we call a starting place for women online to help them figure out how to make all of it mean something. And up until recently, our tagline was, make your online life mean something, because we all spend time online, and it's important to make it matter. But then we realized, well, now, 3 years later from when we started, everybody's online. It's just part of our world. It's just become integrated into normal life. There's no online life and regular life now. It's just all kind of combined. So that is one. It's a membership site. People pay a monthly membership fee, and then they get resourced and have community there. My husband and I recently launched Wildly Co., which is an ethically made kids clothing line, and that's kind of our baby right now. That's our heartbeat and what we're working like crazy on. It actually just went into production. So we ordered 1.25 miles of fabric, and it was shipped from LA to North Carolina, and on Monday they'll start cutting into that fabric to start producing our clothes. So that's super exciting. And then the Tiny Twig is my personal brand, and that's what I write under. And yeah, it's kind of everything else, any advertising money that comes in, things like that. So people always kind of say wow, seems like life's kind of busy for you. And while that's really true, I also still have like a super ordinary life. I don't travel often. When I speak, I try to speak locally so that I'm not super far away from my family. And I still like do school stuff with my kids. I still have like a super normal at-home cook dinner at night, find the recipes on Pinterest, whatever. Same thing as everybody else. We can go to the next slide. Okay. This illustration looks really funny when it's blown up that big. But like I said, I got that first taste of what you could do with a blogger, with writing online, from my friend Michaelin. And for me, I kind of got a taste of that right after my husband and I got married. We came back the day after our honeymoon, came back to that tiny little yellow house. And Facebook had just come to Indiana Wesleyan, and this was back when you had to be a college student to use Facebook, when you had to have like that, the school email address. And I think I'm the only one out of my friends since I got married when I was 20 that my Facebook name has only ever been my married name. I didn't have like Hayley Newton Morgan. It was always just Hayley Morgan. But anyway, I realized there that people were listening to me, and they were following kind of what I was doing. If I posted if I posted a picture or something, then they would kind of do what people do on Facebook. They would comment back, they would share it, all of that. And I think it was a little bit of a morbid fascination because I had this kid all of a sudden, and most of my friends were still like out partying or out doing whatever. And so people kind of kept tabs on me and were watching what I was doing. And I think then I realized like, oh, this could be something. So that to me kind of like is also what this image means. And this is a picture, an illustration depicting when they invented the printing press. And I always liken like Web 2.0 or social media to when they developed the printing press. And when the printing press came to be, there was this massive boom in the sharing of the word and of scripture and of the gospel. And it's because there was this huge democratization of who had access to the Bible. Previously, it was so expensive and so hard to find that only the highly educated or the clergy or the very wealthy had access to the Bible. And the printing press just kind of like put that all to rest. And all of a sudden, like normal everyday people had access to the word and were able to study it and know it for themselves. So for me, I see social media as the same thing. I see it as just a tool to share the gospel and to share the good news and to speak life to people and hope. So, all right, we can go to the next slide to get that crazy one off. In social media, I feel like there are 3 goals. And, sorry, let me get a drink real quick. There are 3 goals, for me anyway. And sometimes I use all 3 of these within one campaign. But you either bring awareness, cause action, or build community. And you do these in really, really different ways. You wouldn't use the same tactics to do those same things. We can go to the next slide. If you're aiming to bring awareness, tell a really beautiful story. If you're wanting to bring action, you're going to have to make an ask, and that's hard. And if you're looking to build community, you have to love well. There's no other way to do it. We can go on to the next slide. All right. This is kind of a little snapshot of my Instagram feed from when I was in Ethiopia, that trip I told you at the top of the talk, where we're all kind of sitting there on that blue wall looking like really tired. This trip, we went on a night, kind of like a bus ride. This man, his name was Wande, he took us around. Addis is the capital of Ethiopia, and he took us around, and he kind of pointed out, like, that girl right there, like, you think she's just standing there talking to her friends. She's probably about 13. She's actually dressed up like that because she's a prostitute, and that's how she's going to make her money to survive. And so we went, and we just saw these really hard things, and it was this, like, 2-hour-long tour, and it's just dark, and it's black, and you just see these girls. They're really just little girls, and they're dressed up like women. And you see these men, they'll walk and they'll say, like, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And coffee is really big in Ethiopia, so it's a way that they connect. And we heard that a lot of these women, they would become pregnant because of just poor contraceptive education, things like that. And then what do you do when now you have another mouth to feed and you have a child to take care of? These little girls really would end up, they just leave their kids at night, and they would put them down like under like a little shanty or like a little kind of lean-to that they had set up, and they just leave their kids. So then that leaves their kids also to be victimized. So it's kind of just like this cyclical, really just hard life and hard pattern that things get into. So we went, and that was our first night. Like, this was after like 48 hours of travel, and then we get there, we drop our bags, and all of a sudden we're like I'm in a bus with the Bachelorette, all of a sudden like, oh, we're seeing all these hard things. But then the next day they took us to the centers that they've set up where they'll go and they'll bring these women, and they'll like say, hey, can we talk with you? They'll buy their time so that they're not just like wasting their time. And they'll just talk to them and start to build a relationship. And then eventually they will hope that they will join these programs. It's called Women at Risk, but they will give them free health care, they'll give them free child care, they'll give them training in a trade. And Fashionable, the scarf company, they actually then employ the women after they learn the trade of weaving. So it's kind of this holistic thing. But at first, all I saw was darkness and sadness and poverty. And then I was able to see the hope on the other side. And that's kind of just how my mind works. Like, I think in this like binary, like, what does the world fear? And then what's the flip side of that? And the flip side of that, to me, like, the answer is always Jesus. And I feel like in Sunday school, like, if you don't know the answer, you just raise your hand and you say, Jesus, like, that's the answer. But in my life, like, that's really true. And so I see the work that they're doing, and that's hope, and that's freedom. So that was the story that I was telling in these pictures. And because of the time difference, my friends and family and the people who follow me on social media, they would wake up. And because of the time difference, there wasn't the, like, my picture and then like 19,000 other people's pictures and then another one. Because they were sleeping, it was all like they'd just see my post one after the other after the other. So I was able to kind of tell these whole stories through pictures and words of kind of what I was seeing there. And that trip was mostly to bring awareness to their organization. It wasn't really to create a whole lot of action. They didn't have a whole lot of hard asks. So I just really concentrated on really doing justice to the story and really like bringing honor to these women and dignity. And I'm like super against that whole idea of poverty tourism. I don't love like when it's like, we're gonna get on a bus and take pictures of you and then exploit you to further some cause or whatever. So I try to be really sensitive and really, there were some women there that they didn't want their picture to be taken. And you just say like, okay, and you value their story anyway, you hear it, and you kind of, just really honor them in that moment and then move on. Okay, so that was bringing awareness. For me, the hardest one is making the brave ask. I feel like I could tell stories for days and days and days, but the second that you say like, and now buy a scarf, or now pay $16 a month to sponsor Mocha Club, that for me is hard. Like, I feel like that's super difficult. I'm not salesy by nature. But what I have come to understand is that if I have something of value and I don't make that known to other people, that's doing a disservice to them. So that is how I've kind of started to look at it, that when I have something that I know is really great, if I don't inform other people of it, I'm doing them a really big disservice by not asking them to be involved. So the Influence Network was one of our businesses, and we have a conference every year. It's in Indianapolis. It's normally in the fall, or it's always in the fall. And I have to, because we sign these like $40,000 contracts with the hotel before we ever sell tickets, the rest of the year I'm constantly like, so come to the conference, please come to the conference, it's gonna be great. And that's my hard ask all the time, is to get people there. And I, on social media, I'm really big on not promoting that FOMO thing, the fear of missing out. I never want to be like, come to the conference, or you're gonna miss the most amazing weekend of your life. I never want to do that because it's not realistic for everybody to come to the conference. And I never want my social media platform to make somebody feel less than. So for me, it's that really delicate balance of how do you call somebody to something without excluding other people. So it's something I'm still working through and still really trying to figure out. But technology and media changes so quickly that once you think you have it figured out, it changes anyway. So it's just kind of always be thinking. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, and to build a community, which I think you have to build a community to do either of the other ones anyway. If you don't have a community already listening, there's no point in telling a story and you can't really make an ask. So whoever's following you, like, be wildly inclusive and love them well. Like, that is just the best 2 bits of advice I could give you. Encourage is, so there's Hallmark, and then there's Dayspring, which is their like Christian division. It's like all the nice greeting cards that are like verses and nice Christian things, and they sell them in bookstores and all of that. Encourage is their online kind of manifestation of that. And they have done a phenomenal job of really cultivating a really great community, and you know them. Like, if you are online, I think they skew older than your demographic, so you probably aren't aware of them, but they do a great job, and you know who is in that community because you can tell by how they talk or how they act. And so if you're needing a case study of seeing like how to build a community well, I think Encourage, and her name is Lisa Jo Baker. She does a phenomenal job. She leads them right now, and she does a phenomenal job of really embodying that, and she's the most inclusive woman I know. So I've learned a lot from her in that regard. We can go to the next slide. All right. I'm trying to leave time for Q&A, so please have some questions. I feel like I'm going to do the song and dance of the questions again. These are kind of my best practices of things I've learned on social media and what to do online. And I can't read them all from here, so I'm going to have to step down. All right. Everyone influences someone. So when I started out, I didn't have a lot of social media followers, but the ones I had were really listening to me, and they thought like what I had to say was really important. And one of my friends was telling me, well, there's the whole thing of Jesus had 12 disciples, and even one of them unfollowed him. I mean, that's kind of a silly joke, but it's true. And so there's that. But also think if you had the responsibility of shepherding and preaching to those people every week, like, you would be overwhelmed if you had too many people. So everybody influences somebody, and if you have 12 followers or 1,200 or 12,000 followers, each of them is listening to what you're saying, and they're taking something from your social media activity. And for me, I always want them to take something that is hope or is of the Lord. And I'm not always up there, like, saying Bible verses and things like that. There are a lot of brands that I promote that aren't Christian brands. They're like, whatever, HP or whoever. And but you can still tell a story of hope and of freedom in that. Use the tools you have in your hand. If you have a great camera, take beautiful pictures and tell great stories that way. If you have a crappy little, flip phone that takes some grainy pictures, figure out how to take beautiful pictures that way. If you are an English major, write beautiful stories. Write beautiful, really short stories that you can tell on Instagram. Maybe your dad is the CEO of a really crazy, awesome company. Use his contacts and learn from him and figure out how they get their information out. Each of us has been gifted in this time and this place with something from the Lord. And I think it's important that we don't leave those tools on the table, that we kind of utilize the things that we've been given. Use every chance to speak life. This is something that I do all the time. I mean, that to me is the heart of the gospel. The gospel takes us from death to life. And in any interaction with my husband or with my kids or with my mom or my dad or my brothers, none of whom are believers, I feel like I constantly am just trying to speak life to them. I'm trying to say, there's hope in this, there's whatever. And to do that, is the next one, is flip the world's fears on their head. And this is something, like I said earlier, I feel like I have two things I can talk about over and over, and that's the gospel and that you have influence. And I try to think, I'm actually writing my first book right now, and I was talking to one of the publishers, and I was like, well, the gospel is all I have, so that's all I've got to write. I hope that 30 books about the gospel is going to be okay with you. And I kind of had to think of how do you keep making that new? How do you keep speaking hope and speaking freedom and speaking life into people in a way that is new and fresh and tells old truths in new ways? And to me, I just decided, like, I'm going to look at what the world fears or what the world hates and flip it upside down, because God's kingdom is upside down, and it doesn't make sense, and it's totally radical, and it's different than anything we've ever seen before. So I try to think, like, the world, I think people fear being inadequate, and God says we're enough in Christ. People fear not being seen, or they fear being alone, but Scripture says, like, God is always with us. These things are things that I try to think of, and then I try to take it, like, those are the Christian words. Those are the words that we might know because this is the community that we're in, this is the language that we speak. But I try to then think of, how do I put that into a picture? Or how do I put that into a 3-sentence, like, tiny little mini sermon? Without using those Christian words, because I think that then it becomes a universal truth for everybody in a way that we know that all truth is God's truth. Bring people alongside you and then elevate them. I think that this was the way that finally made the internet encouraging to me. I mean, there's a lot of junk on the internet. There's a lot of criticism and a lot of people who are looking to tear you down. But the way that I have kind of combated that is I found a group of people, a group of other women, who we kind of do this all together. And it's always good to elevate other people. And when you elevate them, they'll elevate you and your message. And it's never about you. Like, it's, my social media following is not about me. It's not because I'm fancy or because I'm important. I try to always remember that it's about him, and, like, that's all I want my life to be known for anyway. So shepherd the people who follow you well. If you think of the word shepherd, you think, like in Scripture, it's, somebody who's in charge of the sheep follow him. Well, I think we kind of are in a world of sheep right now. We all follow a lot of people. And I think it is our job as believers to shepherd those people well. And it's not scalable to, like, pray for every one of the people who follows you by name or individually, but I do think that by constantly speaking life and constantly kind of putting the gospel into new ways and just modern kind of ideas of it, I think that you're shepherding them well. Be consistent, but don't be a slave. And to me, like, I think sometimes we think that God wants us to work for him, and I think sometimes we can think that production is value. But sometimes production is just you being on a hamster wheel, making yourself tired. And so I try to be consistent with my social media because people listen to somebody who shows up consistently. But when I find that I'm starting to, like, derive my value from that, that's when I take a step back and I rest, and I know that, like, the world will still spin even if I'm not, like, speaking into it every second. Build relational capital, and to me that's the 80-20 rule, is if I'm going to use 20% to tell a story or to make an ask, then the other 80% needs to be building a community. And that would be promoting nobody in particular, that would be promoting other people, that would be telling other people's stories and elevating them. And that reserves the other 20% to make the ask that you need to ask, whether that's somebody that you're advocating for or a product that you need to sell to keep your business going, things like that. Don't be afraid to make the ask when you need to. I mean, we all have, businesses need money, ministries need money to keep going, and it's okay if you need to make that ask. Compassion International, they used to do bloggers trips. I don't know if they're still going to do them anymore. But a huge part of it was they had these little trackable links, and the people that they took on the trips, like I went on that trip, you would use this link in all of your posts, and it would track how many kids you got sponsored. And so each blogger would have to make the ask, like, hey, this is our goal. We want to get 700 kids sponsored while we're on this trip. Will you help us meet that goal? And for Compassion, they did it for 5 years. And those 5 years, they saw more kids sponsored in those 5 years than any other previous set of 5 years. So sometimes you have to make the ask, and don't be afraid to do that. To me, like, the answer to everything is to love well. And so if you're loving the people who are following you well, then that means that you're putting them before you. That means that you're not looking at yourself as more important. That means that you're consistently speaking life to them. It means that you're not tearing them down. Tell tiny, beautiful stories. That's kind of how I see every social media interaction that I have, is I see it as a 3-minute chance, really less than 3 minutes, because nobody spends 3 minutes looking at anything on their feeds. But I see it as a tiny little chance to impart a little bit of wisdom, or what I would want somebody to know that day. And do it really beautifully, and they'll listen. And to avoid a big head, remember, it's not about you. It's never been about you. Even if you're like a crazy famous, maybe you have 1 million Instagram followers, you still just have 1 million Instagram followers. Like the person at the drugstore, the person at the grocery store, they don't care. They don't know who you are. You're not a celebrity. And on the flip side, don't look at who unfollows you. That's just like a bad life habit anyway. There's nothing good that comes from knowing who decided to detract from your message or deflect from it. And to me, I've done that before, and I've gotten my feelings hurt, and I felt like I stomped around for like a week of like, oh, I don't like that person anymore. Like I want them to be out of my social media feed. And really, like, that's not loving well. So for me, I just ignore it. I don't care. Half the time I'll get like 20 unfollows when I like post a picture of my kid, and I'm like, well, I like my kid, so he's gonna stay on there. But anyway, those are kind of my best practices, the things that I know about social media. I've learned a super ton about social media, whether it's using it in the ministry capacity, whether it's using it in a PR capacity, or marketing or promotions, an activism or advocating role. I feel like I've learned a lot. So if you have any questions also about fashion, I did not talk a lot about our clothing line. Wildly Co. is our ethically made kids clothing line, and it's being manufactured, I guess I can come back to the stage now. It's being manufactured in North Carolina, and we're really excited about it. We kind of saw these ills when I was in Ethiopia, kind of started this whole ball rolling, but I saw the way that work brought dignity to women's lives, or to people's lives in general. And when you gave them a purpose behind their work, that helped even more. And so when I came back, I realized I had all of these people following me online, and I wasn't doing a lot with that. So we decided to start this kids clothing company, because we have 4 kids who are constantly growing out of clothes, and that seemed like a great business because kids always grow out of clothes. So you always need more. And we are trying to kind of right the wrongs of the garment industry by making another viable option of how to shop. And I'm not great at like buying all things ethically. I'm like, sometimes I need a pair of jeans from Old Navy because I need a pair of jeans really fast. But what we're trying to do, because I am business-minded and because I am an idea person, what we're trying to do is to provide an alternative way for people to shop. So we are buying all fabric made in the US, because everywhere else makes their fabric in super sketchy ways. We're doing all of our labor in the States, and we're cutting out all of the middle stuff, like wholesaling, selling through distribution and retailers, so that we can afford to offer things made in really ethical ways at a point where people don't feel like you're gouging them or charging them an arm and a leg. So we're trying to make it really easy and really frictionless to do that. So anyway, that went really fast, and I talked really fast. But I get so excited and I get passionate about these things. And I would love to ask or answer any questions that you guys have, be it anything. I mean, I'm an open book. I feel like I have learned a ton in the last 5 years, and even things of like, out of college, you find yourself not, in a different circumstance than what you thought it was going to be, just any of that. So anyway, I'll just open it up for questions, and if you don't have any questions, then it's going to be super sad and embarrassing and boring. So hopefully you do, and I'm going to sit down if that's okay. Any questions? Yes.
You touched on this a little bit.
Yeah.
What would you say is the line between bringing awareness by telling the story well and then being discounted as just another voice on the internet or even a nuisance?
Yeah.
I.e. getting a like request for Jesus on Facebook.
Right, yeah. Well, for me, I think that I have worked really hard at building community of people who want to hear what I have to say, and they trust my voice. And I also have worked really hard to only pair with organizations or causes that I actually believe in and I'm actually passionate about. So for me, that's been the way that I can make the ask, because I know that the ask will be well received and I know that the ask is worthy. There is a ton of junk on the internet and there's a ton of noise, and it's something where I'm really battling that right now with, like, at what point do we go back to long form writing and spending more time on individual pieces and not just making quick little bite-sized chunks? I don't know that that's good, like, long term for American consumers of information and of products, but I think it all boils down to that you have people who want to hear from you, and if you've built, even if it's just your people on Facebook, I think also you have to know, like, does it do any good? Like you said, like a like for Jesus. Well, Jesus doesn't need likes on Facebook. Like, that doesn't do him any good. But a campaign that a business is giving money for vaccinations for every like businesses do that, and that doesn't mean that the like has value. So I think, like, just really evaluating that, and I think it has to sit well with your spirit. I think you have to feel like, is this what's for you right now? And sometimes for me, like, there are really good and really worthy opportunities that I just have to be like, nope, I've already asked for too much from people recently, or I need to be quiet about this particular thing. So yeah, I think that was my thought. Okay. You had a question? Yeah.
You mentioned some of your websites and stuff, and I think we could find your stuff online if we did some searching, but, like, feel like an Instagram or something.
I do. The Tiny Twig is my Instagram. So it's just at the Tiny Twig. I'm the Tiny Twig on all social media, basically. Twitter. I have, like, a Facebook page. It's the Tiny Twig. Some girl took it. She's like a jewelry maker that stopped making jewelry in like 2008, but she already has the page, so I have to be like some other Tiny Twig on there. But anyway, you can find me. That's my website too, and my email. It's thetinytwig@gmail. So if you guys have any questions at all too, you're totally welcome to email me about them. But I would prefer some more questions right now, or like I said, it's embarrassing. Yeah. What did I major in? Business administration. But I had like 5 majors before that. I was that person that, like, was going to stay in school till they were like 94 if they kept switching majors. So, yeah, but business is kind of, to me, it marries all the things that I'm passionate about. And really, to me, I think that business is the language that Americans speak. We understand things on like a transactional basis. So for me, I'm able to put that general knowledge to basically anything I do. So that's been helpful. Yeah.
How many years were you in college?
Just 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So make sure.
Yeah, no. I went to Indiana Wesleyan, and it's just as expensive as Taylor. So unfortunately, I had to leave at some point. Anybody else? Yeah.
As consumers and as college students with not a whole lot of money, how do we balance cost-effective shopping with ethical transactions?
Yeah. Well, I think I struggle with the same thing because I have 4 kids and not like $1 zillion. So I think it's always a question, and it's not like a shameful question. I feel like we're all asking the same thing. And I don't think you can always buy like the most ethical thing ever. Sometimes those things are too expensive. And I think fiscal responsibility in your personal life is important. But I think if you're not going to buy something that you know is ethically made, like, buy less and buy it to last. So I think just making really informed decisions about what you do buy. And if you do have to buy something, just make sure it's something that you're planning on holding on to. That's kind of that's my rule of thumb if I can't. Like, there are not a lot of kids retailers right now that make their clothes ethically that aren't like $50 for like a kid's polo or something. And I'm sorry, I'm not dressing my kids in a $50 polo. So for me, with my kids, I've had to just find like the best option that I have and just really try to make them last through all my kids. And so I kind of do that for myself too. Everlane is, are any of you guys familiar with Everlane? Some people in the first one were. You are? Okay. Yeah, they are a model that I would say that's what Wildly Co. I would say, aspires to kind of mirror just for kids. And I would say it's more of a comparison than a competitor, but they do great stuff for adults. And they do the same thing about cutting all the stuff out in the middle, the wholesalers, the retailers, all of that. And it makes it so it's kind of affordable. It's not like $200 jeans, So that is my thought. Buy less and plan for it to last. Because I think this is super interesting. About 20 years ago when Bill Clinton was president, 97% of garment manufacturing for the U.S. was actually done in the U.S., and now it's less than 3%. And so this was not like this happened outside of our lifetime. Like this happened while we were alive, and it happened when I remember those years. And so it's not so far gone that it's not like a tide we can't shift. And it's not that I think that manufacturing in the States is like the be-all and end-all answer, but our government does regulate labor, and so it is a way that you can know that things are made ethically. So anyway, that's that. Yeah?
How do you balance this idea of being a healthy consumer of social media, garments, or whatever, with this growing culture of materialism? Like, how do you stay grounded?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, like, how do you have things sit right with your spirit when you're selling clothes?
Yeah. Well, that's something that I've had to deal with as a blogger, because a lot of how you make money is through advertising, and there's more money to be made when you partner directly with a brand than there is on like sidebar ads. So for a long time, I felt like to make an income that made it worth blogging, I was constantly selling something, and I was constantly asking my followers to buy something new or better or different. And so after a while, it didn't sit well with my spirit. I felt gross about it, and I felt like I was just, like the tagline of my blog is inspiring women to create lives of more passion and less fuss. So I felt like it went totally against the ethos of what I was saying. I was saying like, don't be caught up in all of this, and then I was just adding to the noise. And so for me, I had to just shut that down, and I had to say, like, I'm not going to be the person who, even though there's great money in it, I'm not going to be the person that's going to hawk everything there is to buy. And then now being on the other end of it and being a retailer, I feel like I'll always encourage people to buy really thoughtfully and buy less. I don't think we need as much as we think we need. I think as Americans, we have it's just the same way we like to go out to eat. We do it for entertainment. We don't like have to go to a restaurant to get sustenance, to like keep our body going, but it's entertainment for us, and we enjoy it, and it feels good to our to ourselves. And I think the same to be about shopping. I don't think like we all need like 12 pairs of jeans, but I think sometimes when we're bored, it's easy to get online and grab another pair of jeans or whatever. You think the next thing is gonna make you feel great. So I think for me, it's that constant thing of like saying like, how do you counter that materialism, or that, even on social media, like all the noise, all like constant information. I am a huge consumer of information. I love information. When I was at Indiana Wesleyan, we had just gotten like internet in the dorm rooms, which I'm sure you guys are like, that's so crazy, old lady. But I would like constantly at late at night like refresh the CNN site, because I was like, what news has happened while I was sitting here? And so I love information, and I'm a huge consumer of information. But for me, it's that same thing. I have to say like, and there's a point where that's not healthy anymore. And so I think it's that thing of like, take what the world says and flip it on its head and like see what the Lord says about it. And I think it's just that like, there's something that you're not satisfied with. And if there was somebody who was buying tons and tons of stuff, like there's something they're not satisfied about, and I would just encourage them like to find the satisfaction that they're missing. And I think it's the same. And as a retailer, it's hard because you have to sell, and you have to sell volume to be able to get your costs down, but that's how the whole fast fashion thing started in the first place. I don't know if you guys are aware of like the idea of fast fashion, but in your parents' generation or your grandparents' generation, they did not buy clothes like we do now. There wasn't a Forever 21 that you could buy a pair of jeans for $12. There wasn't, you didn't get like 9 pairs of shoes. You got like a pair of shoes for school and a pair of shoes for church. You know, that's just how it was. And now we think it is like our right to have this just constant stream of clothing. And that's because retailers figured if they could sell you more, then you'd buy more, and that's more for their bottom line. And it has become a culture that has infiltrated all areas of consumerism. So for me, it's really also about like just trying to turn the tide on that a little bit. So anyway, did that spark any other questions? This is the chance to ask any secrets, anything. Ask me about The Bachelorette, Jessica Simpson's private chef. No, I'm just kidding, don't, because then I'll get in trouble. Anybody else? Okay, well, if you do think of questions, I'm at The Tiny Twig on all of social media. I'm thetinytwig@gmail is my email. My husband and I are over at Indiana Wesleyan all the time doing small business classes, so if anybody ever wants to get together, if you want to be on that list that we kind of like email, then just shoot me an email at thetinytwig@gmail.com, and we'll be super happy to do that. It's like a 20-minute drive, and we get together regularly with a group of students there who are looking to do business with a mission or something like that. So I would love to see you guys later, ask any questions, anything like that. But if you guys don't have any other questions, it was so great to talk with you today, and thanks for having me. So good.